Okay, we're recording now, and this is the third session between Liberty Shellman, the Executive Director of Woodbine Education Center, and myself, Caroline Savery. We're discussing social enterprise business development in the context of a nonprofit in order to supplement revenue streams. And so in our previous couple sessions, we talked about the business model ideas and how to start moving forward on testing some of the ideas, testing the assumptions behind the ideas, which we will continue on that thread as well today. And we also discussed mocking up business, the business pro forma, which is the financial, the proposed business's financial documentation, including startup, so sources and uses of funds in the startup phase, as well as the actual model once the business would be operational, so the cash flow and balance sheet and things like that. So we started investigating that because mocking up the profit margin against of like how many products or units you can sell against the cost to provide that value, to provide those products, is a basic back of the napkin approach for analyzing your business model. So that's where we're at in the process so far. I definitely want to start today just by hearing from you, Liberty, about how things have been evolving on this project for you in the last few weeks. And if you have any questions that have emerged that you want to ask me or ask about this process. And otherwise, the agenda today is going to be focusing on moving the work that we've been doing forward by looking at COVID-19 adaptations to like how resilient are these business models in the COVID era, and what other what ways of tweaking the business might be appropriate based on what we know and what we don't know about this time. And we'll also be exploring moving forward in terms of vetting the business model idea through doing market research and toward a feasibility study. Although a full-fledged feasibility study may not be necessary for every business, it's the process of vetting your assumptions and attempting to determine whether the business would be viable before launching it. So I want to hear from you, Liberty, how things have been going, what's been evolving, and how your thinking has been proceeding since our last couple meetings. Mm-hmm. Any questions you have for me, and of course, anything you'd want to address in our last two sessions.
Yeah. So for us, we've been sort of working on some of the homework that we had talked about from last time. So one of the things that we've been working on is this business model canvas. And I do have some questions, mostly around language and like making sure that I understand some of the language that's in here. So really I sort of dived in with partners and kind of have left the rest of them sort of blank for now. When we're talking about, I think a lot of my questions kind of revolve around this idea of value propositions, and really like what are we trying to get at there? Because I'm not sure if I like fully understand that language. Does that make sense? Like, is that just trying to ask like what are we providing people?
Okay, I can speak to that, but I kind of want to hear all your questions first, and I'm capturing them in notes, so I can circle
back. Cool.
Yeah.
So discussion like around value propositions, and then I think like where I'm getting held back is just sort of how do I say this? Just kind of like it might be helpful to like see how some of these are done. I feel like there might be like a gap in common practices that I just don't have yet. And so like when we're talking about customer segments, right? Like where, like, I don't know, how do other people do it? And so how should we be kind of looking at it? Does that make sense? Um, and then, so those are my sort of questions that are coming up around the business model. And then, like, I think it might be helpful to see examples or something so that I can sort of know how some of these things are being talked about in other contexts. And then working on the COGS mockups, it made me really realize how much we just don't know, and I'm not quite sure how to figure that out. Like, for instance, with our wedding rentals business, um, do we need improvements on the land? That sounds reasonable. Not sure not sure how much that would cost, not sure, you know. And then I was thinking like supplies, okay, maybe some cleaning supplies, but how much, you know, I don't know yet how much that's going to cost. The utilities, of course, are going to be variable, but again, not sure where to even start trying to factor in some of this income, or sorry, expenses. And then when I was working on our other business model that I'm diving into, which is the property leases, which I made a copy and I shared it with you, Caroline, just if you wanted to look at it at any time. I'm kind of like at a loss there to really where to start. So I just sort of made some things up, like, okay, maybe what we're talking about is office space, land space, and building space. And I sort of like just put in some numbers. What if we got one partner and we just charge them X dollars a month? And I don't know, you know, I'm just not, like, I kind of just plugged some stuff in to see what it would look like. But again, not really sure. It's really coming out of like, it's pretty fictional. I don't really have any solid stuff to base it on. So that's really kind of where we're at, or where my mind's at, just thinking of how generally speaking how little we know to be able to start this process.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah.
And I really do want to stay with your questions and stay with like the theme or the process of getting comfortable with the tools and resolving those questions, which will touch on market research a little, but we don't have to go into all of that today. I want to really get you set up to use the tools fully between now and the next meeting. And then we can, whatever overflows into the next meeting is fine. Now you said you had shared with me the second model. Where did you share it?
Yeah, I just shared it with your.
Oh, there it is. Okay, I think it just took a moment to come into my email. Now I see it.
Okay.
So I'm going to open it. So I just wanted to say to your most recent question or concern, it's totally normal to make things up. Like it is a fiction. You're totally right. You're just kind of, you're mocking it up. And especially at first, the first draft is going to be mostly fiction, right? And the whole process here, the process of a business developer, is to get more and more and more and more confident in the accuracy of the projections and the accuracy of the numbers that you're inserting into your model, and to be able to defend the quality of your assumptions in your model. But at the end of the day, even when you're like ready to go get financing for your business idea, it's still a proposal. It's still a set of expectations, a set of assumptions organized into a narrative. And so that's always going to be true. But again, the process is to get stronger and stronger in the model. And so the first draft feels totally tenuous is totally normal. Every single one of these numbers could change radically by the time the model is feeling like it's ready to be implemented. So totally normal. I just wanted to assure you of that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at it now. So let's see, I want to look at your questions again, and then I will look at the model. So, okay. So you've got 2 questions that are kind of big about the business model canvas, and then two questions about, or questions in general about how to get clearer on the numbers in both of your models, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the COGS model. COGS just refers to cost of goods sold. So what you're really doing, this is more like a cash flow sheet or a balance sheet where you're looking at comparing. It's not a balance sheet because balance sheet takes into account assets, liability, and equity, whereas a cash flow sheet just takes into account how money flows through the business. So you're looking at comparing revenues against the cost to produce those revenues, and you're looking for your profit margin. So that's really where our focus has been. But yeah, so how do you get clearer on the numbers in your model? So let's take it in that order, if that's okay. So let's actually go to the business model canvas first.
Okay.
Do you have a version of that you are drafting that I could actually look at?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think it's the same one that you have access to.
Okay.
Really, where I've plugged in is under key partners. There hasn't been much else.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's 2 different tabs for the 2 different business models.
Hmm.
Are you seeing that here? I'll just put it through in the
I'm
chat.
looking for it. I'm not seeing it. I'm not sure what folder I might have saved it in. Sorry.
It's okay. It's going to come through in the chat in just a second. There you go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Cool. Okay. So let's see. Let me pull up a business model. So this is a great, the spreadsheet is a great tool because you can actually put in tons of information, but I want to take a high level view of the whole of the page. So I'm going to screen share one of the business model canvases from last time. Give me 1 second. Okay. Oh, rats. Every time, sorry, I have to, for some reason, when I copy this one link, that's a link to the business model canvas, and it's happened more than once, it copies the link of a folder that's unrelated. I don't know what's going on exactly. But okay, let me just screen share. I found it again. Let me open this up.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry.
We lost you. Sorry, what was the last thing that you heard?
It was I had just sent you the link.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's perfect. I was actually fumbling to get
Okay.
a business model canvas up on my screen that was a clean one. So I'm going to share my screen now.
Okay.
So you can ignore the comment on the right side of the screen. But this is like a high level. I wanted to just look at it at the high level. I love the spreadsheet because it includes, you can include so much detail in your vision. But I want to just look at it as a whole, which you can also do by minimizing the view, I guess, of the spreadsheet. But I just want to look at it as a whole because there is kind of a process that can be used to go through this model. because there's an order in which the questions are best addressed. And I think way back, I think it might have been after the first meeting or before the first meeting, I sent the business model canvas link along with a 2.5-minute video.
Mm-hmm.
So that video, actually the order in which the sections on the page are presented is a recommended order, one of the recommended orders for going through the boxes, because some things inform other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this one has an additional column of problem and solution statement. That's because this is a product of Adam Brock's when he worked at Joining Vision and Action. And so the problem and solution statement is relevant to permaculture design thinking. And then the purpose. So if we were going through this model, we would start there. And it is meant for like social enterprises, so we certainly could. But in general, we tend to start with customers. When designing a product or service, you tend to start with customers and their pain points, right? That's the common lingo. It's like, what unmet need do they have? What are they willing to pay money for or to extend themselves to receive, right? So you really start there in defining the product. And so the term of segments just means different groupings or types of customers that your product or service would have, which can be defined in various ways. By demographics, by location, by income, by various facets. And so one of the processes in developing a business, it's a good idea to create what are called customer profiles, where you describe your likely customer. You describe your ideal customer. Not your ideal customer, actually, your likely customer. So you can base the design of a customer profile off of actual customers that you've had, or off of your observations of other similar businesses. In this case, you're looking at, for example, transitioning into offering wedding rentals in an existing property. So I would do some analysis around who are you reaching, who is Woodbine reaching with its existing marketing, its existing communications, and who is its existing community? Because being a nonprofit, your community likely understands and respects the values that you hold. And so they if you were promoting wedding rentals and making an ask of them that they hire you, or that they make referrals to their friends and family to hire you, they'd be more likely to respond to that invitation, right? Because they understand your values. So just at a preliminary level, you might start with your existing communities. And then ultimately, you also want to look at the general market, like who is buying wedding rentals, who would be attracted to wedding rentals in a particularly, rustic outdoors setting or a values-based nonprofit setting. Who would be attracted to that? And so you create customer profiles, and there can be multiple segments. There can be more than one. And so instead of just, people buying weddings or whatever, people having weddings, you can break that down into like, and you would target the customer segments differently with different marketing based on the relevant definitions of the segments. So like, I'm just riffing here, but maybe like people looking for outdoor weddings, in Colorado willing to travel might be one segment, because you're outside of the city, so it's people who are looking for that outdoors Colorado type of a scene might be attracted to you. So that might be one market segment, and another one might be like values-driven customers who want their dollars to go to support a good cause and want to incorporate education or, you know, activism like into their wedding because they're coming from a design perspective. They want that in their own wedding. I'm just riffing here, but those might be different populations of people that you would target differently. So that's what customer segments refers to. And so, yeah, and I realize this is not the exact same one as the one that you did. So let me jump over to the one you did and we can go through these. Great, so you did a lot with key partners. That's awesome. Okay, let me scroll over here. So customer segments would be first, and then customer relationships would follow. Not necessarily right after, like one after the other, but customer relationships is about, as the questions pose, it's like, how do the customers expect to be engaged? How do they want to be engaged? How do we communicate with them? How costly are they? So that refers to how much effort and energy and resources does it take to maintain relationships with the customer. Because you're running a wedding business, potentially, it could be very high. There could be high expectations, like a high amount of contact, for example, like returning texts and calls within, 8 hours or something like that. That might be expected from the clients, and so that's something to factor in, and it will affect your costs model as well. But yeah, that's what that section refers to. And channels, this is getting into marketing. How do you reach your customers, right? So channels is about, how do you reach your customers and how do you deliver the products and services? Actually, the delivery, hold on. Delivery, oh no, the delivery would be, so it's the delivery both of your message or your marketing appeal, but also the delivery of the product and service. So in this case, obviously they're coming to your facility for the product and service. They're transporting themselves there somehow. But yeah, so you're looking at the channels through which those customer contacts take place. So you can really start with the right side of the thing. You can actually, some people start with a value proposition, but you can start with the right side and then jump to the left side and then come back to the middle, which is the value proposition. The costs, so at the very bottom on the left and right is the revenue streams and the cost structure. And that's exactly what you've already been investigating with your models, your financial models. So yeah, same idea there, but just the questions that they pose are helpful prompts to deepen that inquiry. So generally that comes last in the process.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So did you have questions about key activities or key resources? If not, we can just jump into value proposition.
Yeah, I think my questions with key resources really was coming from like investigating this value proposition idea. So if we jump there, that I think that's better.
Cool. Yeah, we can do that. Let's see. Okay. So value proposition is a weird term. I'm going to try to break it down a little bit. It's about the proposal of value that a customer receives from your product or service. What do they get out of it? What is the proposed value? The value they get out of it, out of utilizing the product or the service.
Okay.
So being able to articulate the value proposition of your product or service to your customers is a foundational cornerstone of a business model. It's being able to articulate and defend, like, what are they getting out of it, right? What value do you deliver to the customer? So again, looking at different customer segments, what would be the first 3 bullet points, for example, that you would emphasize to a potential customer? The values-driven customer might be different, right, than the outdoor Colorado scenic wedding customer, right? But so you're telling the story of what value they're getting out of it. That's what this is about.
Right. Can we kind of talk through it a little bit?
Sure.
To see what it looks like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're using the example of the kind of Colorado rustic outdoor wedding customer segment,
Yeah.
the value that they receive is a wedding in an outdoor rustic Colorado environment, or am I not hitting it?
That is what they will buy, but they probably won't buy it if you frame it to them like that, right? So the value that they receive would be, and this is where you can have all those adjectives and all the like the value type words, you know, they would beautiful wedding on 62 acres or whatever, you know, like that's where you get more specific about it. So yeah, so for that segment of the outdoor rustic wedding seekers, what is the value of going with Woodbine for their choice of wedding venue?
Right. I don't know. This isn't stuff I've really thought through, I guess.
That's okay.
Like yeah, I don't know, a land connection. A place with a history.
So it does help to really get into research into the customer segment, and there is ways to do market research into that customer segment and really understand what they want and what they value and put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself in their shoes and look at Woodbine through that lens and define what's sorry, I hit my microphone there. Define what's appealing about Woodbine, and also if there are any like drawbacks, find ways to address them proactively, but also like, you know, reframe them or emphasize the value. And so it's like a job interview in a way, right? You're like trying to tell a story of why you're a good fit. So you can think of it that way. If you were talking to a customer like this, how do you tell the story of why Woodbine is a great choice for them?
Okay.
And so yes, the value proposition has to come from a really clear understanding of your customer base. So like the second question is, which one of our customers' problems are we helping to solve? Right? So with that framing, you can think about other values that Woodbine might provide. For example, just to riff on it, like we provide you with a dedicated liaison for your wedding who you can call at any time and get answers quickly. That might be a value that other wedding rental providers are not doing as well of. So it's about distinguishing yourself, right, in this market to these customers ultimately. But again, this is one of those evolutionary processes where you can start with some rough ideas of the value proposition. Maybe you're more affordable. Maybe you're more effective. Maybe you're more whatever, you know, and then you can refine it as you do more research into your customer segment, but also as you maybe get like marketing consulting taken care of for the business in particular. Yeah.
Great. Okay. That's helpful.
Yeah. Cool. So, okay.
Can I ask, like, what are some ways that people start to do some research into their customer segments?
Yeah, so
will we get there?
Yes, I will, but I can jump there right now. That's totally fine. So this was like the next, in my mind, the next project, like phase of a project, right? So you have the basic ideation of developing your idea for the business using the business model canvas as the primary tool. That's first. And then second is the financial model to mock up whether this is a viable idea loosely, you know, that's the second project. The third is to do market research to validate your assumptions and to strengthen your and change and alter your assumptions based on what you find in that research. And so this is getting closer to that viability question of your ideas. So as a third phase, it is, again, similar to previous sessions that we've done. I'm going to be sharing information, but really it's a project that like you kind of need to take on far outside of these meetings, you know, just really need to dig into on your own, but I can articulate the process a little bit for you. So in terms of how do you go about market research, how do you get clearer on this stuff? So whenever I've addressed this question with a client, the tactic that I've used and that I would recommend to anybody and everybody is to talk to your local library about, talk to their business librarians specifically. So most library systems will have a business librarian. This is true for county libraries, Denver certainly, and their job is to help people doing market research into starting businesses.
Oh.
Yeah, that's their job, is to help people with that exact task, because I don't know how it's funded, but I mean, certainly it's part of a value of entrepreneurship, of helping people who are, you know, on their own going about learning how to start a business. So what you do is you go and you present to them your business idea, the segments that you expect to be reaching out to in terms of the market. And they will be able to point you to various and allow access to various industry databases and publications and things like that, both on the customers, like the actual market for your product, who and what their preferences are and what their budgets are and things like that, but also on the business model itself. So looking at comparative numbers in terms of the financial models of similar businesses, right? So what do wedding rental providers, like what is the typical profit margin? What's the typical costs of running that business by state? And there's like various, you know, factors that you can filter by. But there are various industry sources that the library can help you navigate and also help provide access to, because otherwise some of these reports are like thousands of dollars, right? So they allow for you to access them. So that would be my recommendation. And you know, there's different specific databases that it really depends on the industry. So I don't even want to like go into that. I would just say like let the business librarian help you answer those questions. But what I can do after this meeting is I know that Denver Library, their website has some databases that are accessible just by going to the website. So I can share that information. So you can just start some of this yourself with the information that I provide, because I've done this a few times with clients. So I have a general sense of the landscape. But yeah, some of the things that you're looking to validate are your assumptions about the behavior and tastes of your customers, typical costs of a wedding, or let me rephrase that, the typical purchasing price of weddings in a similar in similar markets. So you would be looking at like your region, you'd be looking at Colorado overall, and with each the higher you go in terms of high level category, the less reliable the data, right? So you want to get as granular as you can, but sometimes the data just doesn't exist to be super granular for your instance. So every industry is so different as far as what data is available. So you'd have to talk to your librarian. But so yeah, so you're vetting behaviors and tastes of your audience, your customers, like industry average, wedding prices for rentals. So you'll get clear on those numbers in your model. Costs to provide the service. So what does it typically cost for wedding rental companies that are providing the same scope of service as you would be? Yeah, and then like another great thing to study up on.
So just to, so you
Yeah.
are able to see both what customers are paying and what it's costing businesses?
The first is easier to identify from industry research. The second is less easy. And it really depends. It's so hard to say because every industry is different. I don't know what's out there for wedding rental companies, like what's available as far as reference points. But you'll do this research, you'll gather some reference, and this is at the industry level, so utilizing products from research institutions, but you can also do your own research. So that's another thing. If you have connections that do this similar service, you can interview them or whatever if they're willing to, but a lot of times people are protective of their numbers and of their information. So there's different strategies here, but first would be to go talk to your business librarian. I was going to say the other thing to validate in your assumptions. Oh, now I lost it. What was it?
Real quick, are you hearing the piano? Should I?
A little bit. It's okay. And my roommate just started the shower, so you're probably hearing that.
I'm gonna put my headphones in. I'll be
okay.
Right.
Sure.
Okay. Hopefully that's a little better.
Yeah. Oh, this was the other thing I was gonna share. It's also really helpful to analyze the. Oh, sorry, I just lost it again. Oh my gosh, like just got distracted. Give me 1 second. That's right. Okay. So I've only had to do this once before, which is why I lost it for a minute. Researching your state, at least state, there might also be regional, but I'm guessing for this industry, for wedding rentals, it would probably be at the state level. The regulations governing the implementation of these businesses. So standards, right? Consumer protection stuff. Like what components must you have in place to legally operate this type of a business in Colorado? Certainly insurance is a common requirement, but there may be other regulations that might not be obvious, but if you look up the laws around it, or not the laws, but oftentimes they'll be documented in like policies that a business owner. So for example, I did this research before on behalf of a child care cooperative, and there are like 50 to 90 page documents governing child care centers of different types. There's like child care in the home, there's child care in a daycare center, and then there's various variations on that. And so each one has its own like massive document about what the state requires, and it's everything from like fire extinguishers to sanitation to entries and exits, right, that your facility has to comply with, and administration requirements. So in this case, I'm guessing the wedding industry is so big in Colorado that there would be some kind of industry regulations or some kind of association of wedding rental providers that like has best practices, right? So that's a fourth component of things to be researching here.
Great. I think I missed one of those components. So behavior and taste of customers,
Mm-hmm.
typical costs of services.
So the price point of weddings, and the demand for weddings. So that's another piece, is how big of a business is this? Who would you be competing with? Like if it's a huge business with high profit margins, there's going to be a lot of competition. But if it's like there's way too many people trying to get weddings in Colorado than are able to, that's a great opportunity, right? So you'll be able to discern that from the industry research.
Do you feel like the research onto state regulations
Mm-hmm.
is something that the business librarian
Yeah.
could help with? Okay.
Yeah, and it's also probably something relatively Googleable. Just Colorado State wedding rental licensing or whatever, because it usually revolves around licensing. Like you may or may not need to actually get your business licensed to provide weddings. I don't know what that looks like, but you may, depending on the industry. So, and I would say to kind of evaluate these things almost in that order, right? Because the regulatory stuff, unless there's a make or break issue, like, oh, we didn't realize we'd need to spend $20,000 a year on whatever, like, but the regulations say we do, right? And then that could break your model. Usually that's not the case. So that would come last in terms of the priority here. The priority is first and foremost to understand the market. So how many customers, like what's the demand, what are they paying, what are their tastes and preferences, and what are the trends in the industry? For example, and I'm just totally off the cuff, but I wonder if there aren't like trends related to ethical or value-based, lifestyles of health and sustainability type like customers. That sector is massively growing, right? People who tend to try to make their consumer decisions based on their ethics or their values, of sustainability, things like that. So yeah, really understanding your customers will allow you to really tailor your messaging, tailor your value proposition, and tailor your product. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, so that's the lowdown on the market research piece, which is that's really the next piece. And so again, once you're doing that, you will end up modifying. It's very likely you'll end up modifying your model. You'll change the numbers, you'll tweak the assumptions, and then with the confidence of having done the market research and backing up these numbers, you then would be able to take that and try to get a loan. I mean, that's the typical procedure with a business, is like once you have your business plan, you go and you try to get funding for it, and that's like the final threshold of viability, right? If the bank doesn't believe you, then you might not have like a good business model, right? But so at each of these stages, you're getting more coherent and specific about what you're proposing to do. Yeah, so that's basically it. Would you be going to the Denver library or to the Sedalia, whatever the county is there?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Probably Denver. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this seems like our market really
Yeah,
appears to be more Denver than it is Douglas County or, Sedalia. Like
totally.
the
Totally.
majority of the people that we serve already are
Yeah.
Denver-based people.
Okay.
Probably
Yeah,
Denver.
that sounds good. And I know that Denver has really robust business library resources. So Yeah, that's great. And so given COVID, I'm not sure what it will look like to reach out to them, but they probably are providing online services now.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. And so we still haven't, and we only have like 10 more minutes, but we still haven't yet talked about COVID adaptations. I'm not sure we would have time to do that today. I do want to answer your other questions too, so I'd rather do that, and then we can go into COVID adaptations next time.
Okay.
But the COVID adaptations are obviously a really critical component here, because again, even doing market research, it's like, well, how has the industry been disrupted by COVID? And there's probably some articles, some industry publications coming out about that and projecting trends into the future that'll be relevant to you in your research. But we can also, there's some things we know and some things we don't know that we could maybe make some assumptions from right now. And so maybe let's make that more of a project in our final session,
Okay.
is like talking through what are the known knowns, the known unknowns, the unknown unknowns, etc. And just getting a foundation for, okay, if we're gonna make some moves, like on a chessboard, if we're gonna make some moves in light of COVID, what needs to factor into our decisions, and how can we pivot what we've already been talking about to be more adaptive to the situation of potentially an ongoing, quarantine, mask order, etc.
Yeah.
So cool. So let me return with if it's okay with you, with the last 10 minutes to your questions in the business model. Actually, we might have covered them. Let me just check here. Oh yeah, so I was going to look at your property rentals.
Mm-hmm. The COGS.
Right. Great. So this is everything I shared. I've been talking about the wedding rentals model, but same notion applies to the property leases. One of the ways that you can do, so in terms of like, I'm looking at your property leases COGS sheet, and
Mm-hmm.
the first thing I see is like how much you would be charging for office space, for like co-working, or for outdoor space, indoor space. And right now those might just be random numbers, but one of the ways that you directly can go about researching it, although this will take some time, is to look at geographically as close as possible, or not just geographically, but maybe also like values-based organizations, research what they are charging for similar space, for similar rentals. And you can, if they're actively renting, you can ask them directly. You can pretend to be a customer and just call them and say, how much does it cost? Like, and what are your requirements, right? So this is totally common to do market research through direct contact, posing as a customer, just asking basic questions. And it gives you insight into the market in terms of what is reasonable to charge. How can you come in at a competitive price based on what's out there already? So certainly if you identify some like essential
Sorry.
it's okay. Certainly if you identify like Woodbine is doing something no one else is doing, and we're offering some kind of essential value that's different than anybody else, you can upcharge, or you can massage your pricing in light of that. But at the same time, basing it off of what everyone else is doing is the way that this game works generally. It's like you don't want to be out of people's range, you want to be affordable, and so you just kind of assess from that perspective what's reasonable to charge.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of both the weddings and the like property rentals, I'm noticing that the actual space itself and or maintenance, including janitorial or other like upkeep of land specifically, for example, is the constraining factors. So like just the number of people you can have in a space, or the size of the office, that's essentially the limiting factor. And so there's the question of how much can you, for example, if it's a specific office, like, do you want, like, how long do you want the leases to be, or is there going to be a lot of turnover, or do you want a lot of turnover? Depends on the business model, right? So yeah, I think these assumptions are, like, it's a good start. And so just maybe thinking more critically too about the intersection, like the space is the constraint, and at another level, in terms of quality of services provided, the staff time and energy is a constraint too. And so rather than being optimistic and thinking like, oh, it'll all just work out, like really think through, like, if we're providing this level of service, how much staff time is going to be called for? And what happens if an emergency or a crisis comes up? Or, how does that impact the way staff might get drawn away into this leases business? And if that's true, like, how do we manage that? Yeah, like, is the profit margin such that we could afford an increase in staff time, for example, right? So just thinking through these different factors, and having answers to, like, what if COVID crashes everything? What if, and again, the more you can answer those and feel confident, like, yeah, that's what we would do, that's what would happen. That essentially is the process of business model development. So you're doing it when you're, like, asking and answering the questions as best you can. And so, like, right now, I'd say your business model is drafted. It's not ready to go to a bank to get funding, because they would ask you about these numbers and you wouldn't be able to back it up with information. But once you do that and you refine it, that's basically what we're doing. That's what you're doing, is just, that's what it takes to develop a business model, is just storytelling and getting more and more refined about your storytelling.
I have a question. Some of the factors that went into, like, these initial kind of made up numbers, was thinking kind of the opposite end, not necessarily thinking like what are other people charging, but thinking what can our potential customer base pay. Does that make sense? So maybe like I feel like our customer base might not have the like revenue to be able to pay what standard rates are. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I would push back on that thinking a little bit. If you're going to be offering discounts, do it explicitly, and make and also factor it into your pricing. So make it like a coupon, 10% off, 20% off, 30% off, whatever it is, and factor that into your model. So if the standard rate would be, say, $1,000, but you expect to sell 7 units out of 10 at a discount, 30% based on whatever your internal processes are, for example, like income-based pricing, then you're going to calculate your financial pro forma using those assumptions. And so having a standard rate that is market appropriate, and that's generally best practice. You don't want to come in at way underneath anyone else, because then you'll get flooded with the wrong kinds of customers, right? The wrong people who are like, oh, you're just cheaper than everybody. Great. I just want the cheap, deal. I don't care about anything else, right? So I would say list your prices. This is just a general best practice. List your prices at what is an acceptable or a normal rate. First of all, because sometimes you might get it. Sometimes an organization will say, oh yeah, that's totally reasonable. Here you go, right? And then if they express that they're income constrained, you can, internally, right, that you can offer them coupons, or you can offer certain concessions, because you've already modeled it. You've already factored that in. So you already know what you're working with in terms of profitability, because you don't want to undercut yourself too. Like, what if it ends up, What if the thing is, what if the market rate is partly determined by how much it costs to produce the value, right? So like, if you're like, we're just going to charge 20% less than anybody else, what if it costs you the same amount as those other businesses to provide the service? Then you end up losing money or breaking even at best. So that's why it's not best practice to do that. And so if you are going to offer discounts, make sure you're doing that internally and then letting the customer know after a conversation that it's available, but that you keep it internal, because you don't want everyone to know that you can do that. Otherwise it's not a discount at that point, it's just a lower price. So
yeah. Okay, that's great. That's funny, because that's actually what we kind of standardize as a practice for some of our rental rates, because it was really kind of unstandard prior. And so we really started to come at our rental rates with like a standard rate, and then we could apply discounts on top of that so that everyone could see what the actual rates are.
Yeah, perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And if you end up with more customers requesting discounts, then your model shows that you can actually afford and still make a profit. You still have the liberty to make the decision, like, okay, well, do we really want this customer? Because maybe they'll be a long-term customer, or we just really appreciate the work they're doing. If so, we know that we need to do more fundraising. Like, it's right there on the paper. It's right there in the model. It's telling us that if we accept, this customer, we've run out of our discounts, so we need to raise more money, right? So it's really good to model that internally, and sounds like you're already like on the track to do that. So yeah.
Great. Okay. Super.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And so I encourage you to just, keep developing this, talk to the business librarian, start the process of refining the numbers. And then in a week or two, we can come back together. Oh yeah. What was your question?
So as we're doing market research and sort of collecting that data, what does that look like? Like, do you have any templates, or what, are we just collecting data to then rechange like our cogs and our business model?
Sorry, what? I missed that.
I just said, does that make sense?
So the data is not going to go directly into your model. It's to inform your assumptions, right? So you'll look at the data, you'll look at the analysis, you'll analyze it, and you'll also look at like professional industry associations analyses of trends and things, and you'll say, okay, given this and given this, we assume this for our particular context. And so we're gonna put that number in there. And if there's a number that's especially critical to your decision making, for example, something related to profit margin, then you may want to invest resources into really getting even clearer on that particular consideration. And so talking to consultants that are specialized in that industry, or talking to marketing consultants, like, might help you with making decisions in terms of what's appropriate strategically, what's feasible. But yeah, basically you're looking at the information, but you're not directly going to say, oh, they charge this, so I'm going to charge that. You're actually just using this information and looking at multiple sources of information to yourself decide, okay, based on this, I'm going to filter it into my situation, into this location, this organization, and make a reasonable decision, make a reasonable assessment. Because what funders are looking for is that you've done that, is that you've really thought about it, and you're using this source information, but you're also you've done your own thinking about how it applies to Sedalia, how it applies to Woodbine, how it applies to the current state of the facility, right? How it applies to your current like marketing resource budget or whatever. So with that, right? So yeah, so you're interpreting the data and you're pulling it into your model, but never directly, never just like, oh, this says this, so I'm just gonna throw that number in here, you know? Yeah. And then the librarians will totally walk you through all of this and help you even understand what questions to ask and help you answer them. So yeah, you'll be in great hands, I'm sure. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so next time we're going to talk about COVID.
Yeah, and is there anything else that you would want to cover with our last session?
No, maybe a review of where we've gotten so far.
Cool. Okay.
Like a review of our documents.
Great. Yes. COVID adaptations and review of business documents. And then what we can also talk about is the business model canvas is like a one-page business plan, but you may actually want to write a business plan for these two businesses, even a short one, but one that covers the ground that a business plan covers. Do you have experience writing business plans, and do you have templates that you use? Okay, so let's go over that in the last session as well. I can at least share some templates and talk through like what are the rudimentary elements that have to be in a business plan, and you can see about how you would translate the canvas into a plan document template.
Great. Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So how do you feel about committing to reach out to the business librarian like this week so that you at least have touched base with them before our next meeting? Because I just want to make sure that you feel like situated in that and you're set up, you're good before our next.
Yeah, I mean it'll be today's Friday, so it'll be next week probably. I can reach out to the librarian.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So let's set our meeting for after, whenever you at least would be able to touch base with them.
Sounds good. Do you want to set meeting now?
Yeah, we can totally schedule it now. So I've got Monday afternoons, Tuesday mornings, and then Thursday 11 to 6:30, and I'm sorry, Thursday and Friday 11 to 6:30 available for us. Yeah.
Let's do Tuesday, July 28th. Does that seem?
In the morning?
Uh-huh.
That's perfect. Yep.
Okay.
So, okay. So I've got from 9 to 12:30. What would be good for you?
Let's do 10 a.m.
Okay, great. 10 a.m. and let me, I'll make the event now and I will put the Zoom link in there right now. I realized I did not do that last time, and I will be sure to invite you as well.
Okay.
Cool. This is great, Liberty, and more power to you in your process of developing all the things. I think that you're on the right track so far. So just please do keep note of any questions or issues that you encounter when you're continuing to develop the contents.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, for sure. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.